The US President Donald Trump says that he has spoken with Vladimir Putin about the next steps in his efforts to end the war in Ukraine, and he's hoping to arrange a meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian presidents. Well, the Kremlin has now confirmed a 40-minute phone call between Trump and Putin, during which both leaders discussed the possibility of continuing direct talks between Russia and Ukraine. So far, no date or location has been set for a potential meeting between Presidents Putin and Zelensky, but French President Emmanuel Macron has suggested the talks take place in Switzerland with the involvement of European leaders. Well, all this follows talks at the White House on Monday between President Trump, President Zelensky and key European leaders. Those talks included discussions on future security guarantees for Ukraine, with possible US involvement if a peace deal is reached. President Zelensky said that he's ready to meet President Putin, but stressed that Ukraine must have protections in place once the war ends. While posting on social media, here's what President Trump said about security guarantees for Ukraine. Guarantees would be provided by the various European countries with a coordination from the USA. At the conclusion of the meetings, President Trump said that he called President Putin and began the arrangements for a meeting at a location to be determined between President Putin and President Zelensky. After that meeting takes place, we'll have a Trilat, which would be the two presidents plus myself. So we'll have analysis from our correspondents around the world. But first, this report from Arunade Mukherjee in Washington.
Together and navigating a complex path to peace in what was a day of extraordinary diplomacy at the White House. All smiles amidst an air of positivity. A marked change from President Zelensky's last visit 6 months ago, which ended in a heated exchange.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. If I can, first of all, thank you for invitation and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war. Thank you. And,
loads of thanks and some light humor over the Ukrainian leader's suit this time, given how he had chosen that over the usual fatigues after being criticized last time.
President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, looks good on
I
you.
said the one that attacked you last time. See, now he's I remember that.
Yeah, I apologize to you. You look wonderful.
As the European leaders joined in, President Zelensky hailed the talks to be the best conversation yet with Donald Trump. Europe and the UK will be key to any NATO-style agreement that they would all rally to defend Ukraine in the future. Conversations largely centered on what security guarantees Ukraine would be given and the level of US's involvement.
There's going to be a lot of help. It's going to be good. They are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe. But we're going to help them out also. We'll be involved.
But later on, in a post on Truth Social, Mr. Trump's offer for help was explained as, quote, coordination from the US, making the exact same nature of help from the US still unclear.
What shall we do when the war is over? Protection after the end of the war. It is very important that the United States of America sending the signal that they will be among those countries who will help and who will coordinate, and that they'll be participating in the security guarantees for Ukraine, which is a huge step forward.
President Trump says he is now working to arrange a bilateral meeting between the two countries at war and then a possible trilateral meeting, after that with him present. Speaking to the BBC after the talks, UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said he was pleased with the outcomes of yesterday's meetings.
So a real breakthrough on security guarantees. This is something that's been needed for a long time, very important for security back in the United Kingdom as well as across wider Europe. And then secondly, moving on with the bilateral meeting and then trilateral meeting between the presidents and the second one including President Trump. That is in order to try to get to an outcome, a peace that is lasting and that is just.
As President Trump tries to project himself as the leader who is trying to get peace deals done around the world, that remained the crux of the conversations all through yesterday, with European leaders complimenting his efforts in trying to resolve the conflict. In the absence of a ceasefire, leaders know they are racing against the clock to get a peace deal done. Until that happens, the military onslaught on the ground is expected to continue. Arunodaya Mukherjee, BBC News, Washington.
Well, just hours after those peace talks wrapped up in Washington, Russia launched a series of overnight attacks on cities across Ukraine. Over 270 drones and 10 missiles. That's according to Ukraine's air forces. It's a reminder of the reality for millions of people there living through an active war. Well, Ukraine's foreign minister says that the overnight attacks show it's critical to end the killing and ensure security guarantees. Our correspondent Katie Watson has more from Kyiv.
270 drones launched into Ukraine overnight, as well as missiles. Now, most of those were intercepted, but still, we're talking 16 different locations that were hit. In Donetsk, there were several strikes that killed at least 5 people over the last 24 hours. There have been strikes in other parts of the country that have taken out power supplies. And that's what President Zelensky has said all along, that there is a war raging here. Russia needs to stop the killing. There needs to be this ceasefire before there can be negotiations about a future peace deal. And people here in Ukraine, I mean, that's absolutely what people here feel. People who are watching, waking up every single day to learn of new strikes, and of course they can hear the sirens as well across the country, warning them about that. So they're very much living every single day an active war, and they want to see a stop to that before negotiating further.
Katie Watson there in Kyiv. Well, our Ukraine correspondent James Waterhouse, who's at the moment in Brussels, well, he says that Donald Trump seems committed to a permanent deal rather than a temporary ceasefire.
He doesn't see the point in it if it's going to be flimsy, if it's going to be broken. He wants a lasting agreement. Europe has, I think, played 2 characters here. It has nodded along saying, OK, we agree with your vision, because it has to, but it's also reiterated its preference for there to be a ceasefire. Not least because that equates, despite these peace endeavours, despite this direction of travel seemingly towards a one-on-one meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, which the Kremlin has yet to confirm, I think with the war still being hot, if you like, going into that, there are question marks over how constructive it could be. How could Volodymyr Zelensky sit opposite the architect of a 12-year campaign of aggression and 3.5-year full-scale war and try and thrash out a common ground when cities continue to be terrorised, as you've seen in the case of last night, by hundreds more drones. So that's difficult to imagine. Nevertheless, it is this type of format where difficult discussions take place, where you have 2 adversaries in the same room. It is that kind of format where some kind of blueprint for peace, and a lasting one, is thrashed out. But, there are so many gaps in detail in terms of what American security guarantees could mean. Does it mean boots on the ground? Does it mean ammunition, intelligence, or all of the above? And to what extent Europe can provide a meaningful security guarantee with their own military capabilities. There are big questions, and it's all about how the Kremlin reacts to what Europe hopes will be a shared proposal with the United States.
James Waterhouse there. So we're getting a lot of reaction from the countries that took part in Monday's White House meeting. The Finnish Prime Minister, for example, is saying that the meeting between Trump and Zelensky was a very important step. And in about an hour or so, the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, will chair a virtual meeting along with the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, of the Coalition of the Willing, to brief leaders on the outcomes of those Washington talks and also to discuss next steps. The coalition, which includes the UK, France and Germany, is a group of nations that have pledged to help safeguard peace in Ukraine once it is achieved. So let's cross over to Westminster. Our political correspondent Joe Pike joins us live now. So Joe, what more do we know about this virtual meeting that Sir Keir Starmer is co-hosting with Emmanuel Macron?
Well, Kasia, it's due to start in about an hour's time, although Keir Starmer's only landed back in the UK in the last half hour or so. So he's quickly moving on to the next political commitment of his pretty busy day. I think this is pretty clearly a download debriefing session between various European and Commonwealth leaders. Not everybody in the coalition of the willing was, of course, at the White House yesterday. So I'm sure Keir Starmer, as the chair of today's meeting, even though he's the co-chair of the coalition alongside Emmanuel Macron, will be putting his view across as to the next steps. The big unknown here, firstly, does seem to be, as James Waterhouse touched on, what US involvement in security guarantees will actually be, even though Donald Trump has committed to them. And on that point, we're expecting UK officials to arrive in the States today to start detailed talks about the US's role. So I'm sure that will be fed into today's meeting. A lot of other challenges, and the big unknown, I suppose, aside from the details of security guarantees, Kasia, is what Vladimir Putin does next. My understanding from talking to UK government sources in the last few hours seems to be that European nations have decided to, for now, go all in on Donald Trump's peace process, be seen as supportive as possible. That's certainly what we heard in the White House yesterday. And I suppose the strategy seems to be, if it goes wrong or falls apart, well, Donald Trump is not able to blame any European nation or Kyiv either. And also, certainly, UK government sources hoping that Volodymyr Zelensky is now in a better negotiating position after yesterday's meeting, both because of those security guarantees, but also because Donald Trump didn't ask him, on camera at least, to talk about territory and land.
OK, Joe, we'll keep an eye on as and when that summit or meeting takes place, a virtual meeting of the Coalition of the Willing. Thank you so much, Joe Pike, there, our political correspondent, joining us from Westminster. Joe saying that meeting, in theory, starting in around an hour's time. We'll bring you all the very latest lines on that. Now, Michael Gahler is a German member of the European Parliament and the current chair of its Committee on Foreign Affairs. And he told me that a ceasefire is a necessary step in negotiations aimed at ending the war in Ukraine.
I think that is one of these problems that remain after this meeting, which of course avoided an escalation like we saw before, and Trump saw that Zelensky is not alone. But the point is the consistency of American positioning. We all recall that he was saying some time ago, well, in 50 days there must be a ceasefire, otherwise we have sanctions, and he shortened this whole period. And then after meeting in Alaska, all of a sudden, apparently Putin convinced him not to have a ceasefire. I think a ceasefire is necessary because it proves whether or not Russia is at all willing to embark on a process of negotiations towards ending the war. And I think there is no clarity whatsoever to the contrary. As we spoke yesterday when we saw the leaders arriving, the air raid started in Kiev and other cities. So that remains to be seen whether there is willingness on the Russian side.
So that was Michael Gahler, a German member of the European Parliament. Just a line coming in from Volodymyr Zelensky himself. He's been posting on social media on the X platform saying that yesterday important talks took place in Washington with the president and with European leaders. He says that this was a truly significant step towards ending the war, ensuring the security of Ukraine and our people. We're already working on the concrete content of the security guarantees. Today we continue coordination at the level of leaders. There'll be discussions and we're preparing for the relevant formats. We'll continue working tomorrow. National security advisors are also in constant contact now. There will be security guarantees. And just adding that he thanks all the partners for their determination and support. Ukraine feels this strength. We will do everything to make the path to peace a reality through partnership, through security guarantees and through the courage of the Ukrainian people. Those security guarantees a little bit vague at the moment, but we know Finland is calling for the US to back up those security guarantees. And when Zelensky talks about the courage of the Ukrainian people, 270 drones fell overnight from Russia into Ukraine, 10 missiles as well. So the reality on the ground very far from those diplomatic talks. We're going to